Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, Katana is on assignment in Cleveland, Ohio, but in today's news, we are seeing signs that China might be looking to ditch the U.S. dollar before the American economy gets worse. Now, we're also going to report on how President Trump wants to remove U.S. NATO troops from Germany. And here in the U.S., the president is slamming the governor of Washington for not shutting down a group of protesters who have taken over 6 blocks in Seattle, declaring it an autonomous zone. But first, the death of African-American George Floyd has sparked outrage across the United States. Now, we've seen race riots in over 29 American cities now, and the police are directly in the line of fire. Now, regardless of color, people have taken to the streets in anger and demanding justice, not only for Mr. Floyd and his family, but for the people of color all over the country. Now, in Minneapolis, where the murder of George Floyd took place, fires and looting have taken place all over, and with protesters still out in large numbers, it's like a city under siege. Now, they are calling for not only the defunding of the police, but to completely eliminate the police force altogether. Now, the mayor, Jacob Frey, wants to help, but pleads with his community, saying, "There is no honor in burning down your city. We as a city are so much more than this." Now, in Los Angeles, police officers there have been attacked by protesters and their vehicles have been burned. Now, aside from the violence, looting of high-end shops has been extreme there, as well as in Beverly Hills. Now, one LA officer told reporters, comparing it to the past race riots, he said, "It's one of our darkest days when I saw it last, and it's repeating." Now, it's stretched all the way to the East Coast as well. New York City, just reopening from its COVID-19 shutdown, now seeing a wave of angry protests as well. And in Washington, D.C., just a block from the White House buildings were set on fire. Well, in Ohio, one man who disagreed with protests took aim at the demonstrators with a bow and arrow, but the crowd quickly stopped him. And in Detroit, a teenager was killed by gunfire. Now, the police are fighting back, trying to gain control over a situation that has been compared to total anarchy. Now, cities have called for curfews, and officers are making arrest after arrest for the vandalism and violence. Now, even reporters have come under fire by the police in their efforts to gain control of the situation, using flash grenades, tear gas, and rubber bullets. Now, some government officials believe there are radical extremists with their own agenda at work in the midst of these protests, like Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who said in a briefing, the situation in Minneapolis is no longer in any way about the murder of George Floyd. It is about attacking civil society, instilling fear, and disrupting our great cities. Now, the Department of Justice agrees, releasing this statement saying, "Groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate and violent agenda." Well, President Trump has made it clear he will not tolerate an angry mob mentality, saying in one of his addresses at NASA, he said, "My administration will stop mob violence." Now, Trump says we need, quote, "healing, not hatred, justice, not chaos," unquote. Well, and he also warned in a tweet, protesters trying to attack the White House will be greeted with the most vicious dogs and ominous weapons. Well, the demonstrations continued into a second weekend, but as the crowds grew across the country demanding change, so does the tensions between them and officials. Now, a video was posted on Instagram of police surrounding a vehicle smashing the windows and then dragging a black man out to the ground, placing him in handcuffs. Well, in New Orleans, authorities were tear gassing everyone on the streets. There have been violent clashes in places like Seattle, Washington, and New York City. A cell phone captured police striking a cyclist repeatedly with their batons at an intersection. And now 2 officers in Buffalo, New York are under investigation after a disturbing video emerged showing them shoving an elderly man to the ground. And we do have to warn you, if you've seen these pictures, they are somewhat disturbing. Well, the 75-year-old man suffered serious injuries, but the officers kept walking past him as he laid on the sidewalk, bleeding from his head. Now, the man, who is a well-known activist, was rushed to a hospital where he is still in serious but stable condition. Now, at first, the city claimed the man tripped and fell, but when the video surfaced, the police commissioner ordered an internal investigation and immediately suspended the officers who were involved. Well, the police officer directly responsible for Mr. Floyd's death, Eric Chauvin, has been charged with murder and is now on suicide watch. And from all the chaos, there is a message going out that people are angry and tired of the way things are. They are begging and pleading for a real change, for real justice, and for the opportunity to feel their lives matter. Now, as they repeat Floyd's last words over and over, "I can't breathe," they have taken on a strong meaning across the country as things have spun completely out of control. Well, but the protests are not contained to the United States alone. People have risen up in unity across the globe, all demanding the same equal treatment, regardless of the color of their skin. Now, we have some clips of the demonstrations going on in Europe as well as Asia. If you would, please take a look at this video.
शान्ति सुरक्षा कायम गराउन सहयोग गरिदिनु होला धन्यवाद।
Protesters here are fighting back, attempting to defend themselves with fireworks and Molotov cocktails. The police have brought in armoured vehicles. They're using them to try to break through the barricades. The protesters are using them as targets. This time successfully, forcing the police to retreat, under fire, stumbling from the flames. A number clearly injured on the ground. The protesters have homemade shields and numbers. The police have water cannon and stun grenades. The protesters are helping to carry their wounded away. The remains of what were their tents burning in Independence Square, fueling a sense of desperation and injustice.
Well, as you can see there, some of those protests look more like a war zone than what used to be flourishing cities. Well, we're now going to go to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been covering a story from Seattle, Washington, about a 6-block zone there that protesters have called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And also he has a story on how President Trump is cutting back on the troops, actually pulling out the troops in Germany. Larry, what is the story behind this 6-block zone that the protesters have taken over?
There have been open calls at this point for population reduction measures coming from top philanthropists and governing bodies like the UN alike. And as the world unravels in escalating hostility due to ills, both physical and social, the cause for those oligarchical fears are also simultaneously becoming more apparent. A case in point is the ISIS-style autonomous zone recently declared in Washington state, where a group of citizens in Seattle rose up and seized 6 blocks and declared it a government-free zone. The governor of the state sees the situation as a matter that will ultimately fizzle and resolve itself before too long, but President Trump has stated in strong language that if the governor doesn't take action to settle the issue soon, then the federal government will. That would, of course, involve the use of force. But that bespeaks the point. How much force can the government apply against citizens who are aroused and determined to fight back before there is all-out war between the majority of the population and those in authority, who are a very small minority but have groups of soldiers trained for war and armed to the teeth with every sort of weapon imaginable? Experts are cringing at the thought of the military being called in to handle domestic matters, and there is an expectation that the option of deploying the National Guard in Washington might come first. The problem in deciding how to handle the matter, however, is that there is as much fighting in the U.S. government as there is fighting in the U.S. streets, so that the governor of Washington state, Jay Inslee, who is a Democrat, is disinclined to accept much in the way of advice coming from the current president, who is a Republican. Nonetheless, analysts say that while there are hopes that the matter will be resolved without serious violence, the bottom line for the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone is that it can simply not be allowed to stand. There are strong suspicions that Germany is no longer in great standing with the U.S. after years of conflict over foreign policy and money issues. And there are unconfirmed reports now that the president intends to cut troops in Germany by as much as 10,000. To counter that, German officials have gone on record as saying that American troops in Germany benefits America and not Germany, and that the U.S. is not doing Berlin any great deeds by having them there. The defense minister stated recently to reporters that the U.S. presence in the nation serves the overall security of the NATO alliance, and thus American security as well. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Jeff, back to you.
Well, Larry, it looks like the German defense minister was reminding President Trump that the U.S. also benefits from having troops there on the ground, as well as what NATO and Germany does. Well, finally, we're going to end with a story that could flip the U.S. economy upside down. Now, according to a Chinese news agency, China is going to start selling off the U.S. debt that it has control of. Now, this is such a big deal because China owns more debt than pretty much any other country in the world. Now, one might wonder, why would they pull out of such a huge partnership? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. Federal Reserve has been lowering interest rates to encourage the American people to invest in the country's real estate. And just today, the Fed was being pressured to take the interest rates into the negative numbers. Now, this on top of them printing over $2 trillion to buy back billions of dollars of bonds to put into banks and sell out in stimulus checks, or rather send out in stimulus checks. All of this is being done in an effort to save the U.S. economy. But it is actually worrying investors like China because they know the U.S. dollar is growing very weak in value. So basically, experts are saying China recognizes the signs much like those that took place before the Great Depression, and they are getting out before the U.S. takes them down too. Well, as you can see, the world we live in is a very uncertain and shaky place. If you would like to learn more about what is taking place in the world as it pertains to Bible prophecy, contact the House of Yahweh. You can also, when you do contact them, ask for a free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Inside, you will find loads of information on how you can protect yourself and your family from the things that are coming upon this earth at this time. Now, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. If you would like, you could visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. If you'd like to make an international call, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, please don't forget to go to YisraelSays.com or AskYisrael.com. There's actually tutorials that show you how to use these Bible search programs. They're completely free. They're keyed into or connected with the books of Israel and all of the writings of Yisrael Hawkins. You can search them, find loads of information on any topic. You will certainly be glad that you looked into these programs. They answer all your scriptural questions. Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another informative message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman. Thanks for watching.